Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production. Now available on Spotify, PodcastOne.com, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Your profile said you just love summer.
I do. I'm a runner.
I'm a destroyer.
What?
Destruction. It's my thing.
Okay, we're done here.
Wait, I have a boat. I'm a nice guy.
Hi, this is Jamie from Aquaside Company. This season, clear your water completely. We're the specialists with the knowledge and the right products to destroy weeds, algae, and the muck from your waterfront property. Call 800-328-9350 or visit aquaside.com.
Come back. I watch cute cat videos.
Visit aquaside.com.
I play ukulele.
Amazon is hiring near you. Earn a competitive wage and start as soon as 7 days. No resume or experience required. Health and safety are a top priority with all of our roles and sites. Amazon is taking precautions in our buildings to keep people healthy. Go to amazon.com/apply. That's amazon.com/apply. Amazon is an equal opportunity employer.
A really good rule of thumb, and I talk about this to a lot of young athletes, sometimes we get so connected and so emotional, like, oh, it's so great, it's so great. No, that's not what you should do. What you should do is go, nobody gives a shit about your work. This product that you made is not that important. Instead of being like, I'm going to enter this situation and I'm just going to show up and do the best I can.
Don't you know that the music should be solemn?
This is Theo Rossi. This is Theory. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine. What's up, everyone? Today on Theory, she's a volleyball legend, a New York Times best-selling author, Nike's first female spokeswoman, and on top of it all, a mother and just all around badass human. Let's go sit down and break it down with Gabrielle Reece. So, how are you today? I just saw you yesterday, isn't it?
I'm great. I pull trained very hard today.
Okay.
And everyone seems okay. I think my middle daughter did come and say my youngest daughter is just mean. And I'm like, yeah. My middle daughter, just to give you a reference, is 6 foot barely, but 175 pounds of straight.
Yeah, ready to go.
And the other one is 12 and very tall, but like, and the other one could just go, and she doesn't.
How did that work with like height with you? Were you always tall, or was it one of those like Dennis Rodman things where he grew like 8 inches in college? Were you just always
6 feet at 12?
Wow.
Done it growing at 15, 6'3".
See, it's so funny. My sister is 5'9", and I thought she was so tall.
That is tall.
It is tall, right?
A girl from Staten Island with those backgrounds.
5'9". It's tall.
You're not African or German. I mean, that's
North African. North African. My great grandma was North African. Yeah, so from Tripoli in Libya. Oh, yeah. So there you go. So there's something in there. But I think it's more of she's definitely way more Middle Eastern, like as in the Syrian and Lebanese. She has way more of that in the family. She looks way more of that, but she's just always been tall. And I felt that was super tall because my mom's super short.
Yeah.
But what I've always been fascinated by, because my 2 kids right now, because they're 2 and 4, my wife's side of the family is everyone's very tall, super tall.
Good breeding.
And I could already see that these 2 are like, just when I go to pick them up from school, I'm like, wow, you are way taller than all the kids in here. So I'm always curious of some people level off and then some people just explode out of nowhere. So the girls are 1 over 6 or they're both over 6?
No, the youngest I think will be about 6'1", and the middle is I think done at 6. And the oldest is my bonus child I came to her life when she was 4 months old.
Right.
So she's like 5'8" or 9. Her mom's quite compact.
Her mom's shorter.
Yeah, she's a compact little girl.
Now you said, do they train with you? Do you train with them?
My girls?
Yeah. Like you said, do they swim with you? Like when you go in the pool and do all the training, they don't do that.
No, I'm their mom.
Ah.
I mean, it's like, it's not different. I mean, I have people come from across the country, athletes, NBA guys, they come to train with us.
Right.
And, kids are like, oh, fucking.
I'm hoping. See, my kids want to do everything. Like when I go running, they're like, Daddy, can we run with you? Like right now, they're in that.
Perfect.
They want to do anything you do. They do jujitsu. They go to the same gym. Like they're in, but they're kids. They're 2 and 4.
Yeah, my kids were a little more into it. Now, they find their own identity away from you. So, speaking of jiu-jitsu, Royce Gracie was over and he said, so he says this to me. What was it exactly? No home saint does miracles in their house. And basically we call that an expert, somebody who lives a mile away.
Yeah.
So that's, our kids will find it on their own.
Yeah. I always find that's so weird that you say that. I found that with people I'm close to, and this doesn't even have to do with kids. It probably will when I'm older. But I find with people that I'm close to, let's say I know something, I know that they're not going to listen to me. I almost have to say I heard it from somewhere or I read it. I'll be like, hey, you know what I read? If you stop doing this, like it's supposed to be really good for your life. But if I said, hey, if you stop doing this, it's really good for your life. But if they think it's coming from someone else, they'll go, oh, maybe I'll try that. But I said, they don't want to listen, especially my wife. Like I have to tell my wife, I hear.
I was going to say, it sounds like marriage. Sounds like marriage.
Speaking
my youngest daughter talks to Laird about surfing, whatever. I'm just like, oh, this is interesting to hear you talk to your dad about do you know about that kind of surfing? And Laird's like, yes, I do.
I know about all kinds of surfing.
I kind of know it.
But they're trying to one up him on the surfing talk.
Or they have guy friends because they're 12 and they're like, Ryan does this kind of surfing. Do you do that? And Laird's like, yeah, I did that 50 years ago.
Yeah, I was excited when I found out Kelly Slater was Syrian because I grew up Syrian and I didn't know anybody who was Syrian. And it was like, Kelly Slater, Syrian? That's amazing. I didn't know. I've only surfed twice in my life. It just wasn't a part of my thing. So here's what we've talked so many times, but there's a couple of things we've actually never talked about due to technical difficulties and due to whatever that I've kind of wanted to ask you because we definitely exhausted my Staten Island upbringing, which is just great. We'll never figure that one out. It's the Rubik's Cube inside the unopenable box. It's a very strange place, but you were actually born in the States and then raised in the Virgin Islands. Yeah.
So my parents met in California. And my father's from Trinidad. Well, he passed away, but he was from Trinidad. And he was coming out to California. It was probably 68, 69. Mm-hmm. And the expectation was that the boys in the family became doctors. My grandfather there was a doctor in the Port of Spain in Trinidad. And my mother was from Long Island, New York. And so she was failing. She came from a super Irish Catholic family. And they met in Marina Del Rey, and no one will ever, some of the adults around have said this to me, but, I think it was chemical reaction, both very young and attractive people. Mm-hmm. And I think I was a total surprise, and they were not together long. And then my mother trained in a circuit, dolphins in a circus when I was 2. And I ended up getting whooping cough. She couldn't take care of me then. So I moved for 5 years to Long Island and lived with childhood neighborhood friends of hers, a couple. He had just come back from Vietnam. They either were not having or could not have children. They took me until I was 7. And then my mother remarried, and my father died when I was 5, but they were broken up already. My mother then married someone from Puerto Rico. And so then I was then brought down to the Virgin Islands and raised in St. Thomas, which was such a blessing because my father was from an island. And I am married to someone from an island. Mm-hmm. And so what it did is it got me to connect with that side of my family because I understood the culture, because that was the culture I grew up with. And then also later it unfolded in, if people look at Laird and I and they go, oh, blonde and they're athletic and that's what bonds them. And it's no, actually we're islanders. And that is our perspective of life is very similar.
And that's the perspective I kind of want to talk about because that's so opposite, even though I'm technically, I wasn't born on the island. It was Brooklyn and then the island, but it's still not an island the way we're talking about. That is a completely different upbringing where you were compared to what you're seeing your kids do now. It's a totally different way of life, right?
It is. Well, okay. So part of why we also raised our kids in Hawaii was to make sure that we always say firmly rooted in the ground, reach for the stars. So it's have a good value system, but know that you can do or be anything you want. And see, because islands limit you in one way. So you don't think, oh, well, how do I want to express myself in this lifetime? But they do ground you. You know, there's the auntie-uncle culture. There's like accountability because there's one road and you don't flick someone off and like they're going to come, like it's like a different culture. So we did that for our kids, but certainly very, very different overall. Laird and I grew up more rough and tumble. Any adults in my era in the 70s that were moving to the Caribbean from the States is what we called it. What were they doing? They were all escaping. And Laird's mother moved in the 60s to Hawaii to get away from, the establishment. So, it's a similar being raised by these sort of rebellious, a little bit loosey-goosey parents.
And you said something there. You said that there's certain things that you miss out on growing up on an island, right? And then there's certain things that obviously growing up in the city, I feel I missed out on, right? There's nature and certain, ways of life, slowing down, not over talking each other, all this. Don't you feel that the things that potentially, like, what are some of the detriments you feel that maybe was different, for you, that you were, from living in Long Island, but you were too young to really understand Long Island.
Right.
If there's a detriment, what was something that when you left there, you were like, whoa, what is, I didn't realize people did this. Like, cause you went to Florida next, right?
Yeah. After St. Thomas, I was getting into kind of nowhere trouble. I was just not doing anything. And I was 15 and I looked probably 22. I was 6'3" and blonde, whatever. But when I left Long Island, my Aunt and Uncle Joe, the people who raised me, that's what I call them, they were stability. However, they had graduated from high school. My Uncle Joe worked for the New York Sanitation Department, and then he did construction. My aunt drove a school bus. It's like, these were people that were raised with, and this from where you come from. You get older, you probably end up with the person that you were with. You get a job and you take what life gives you. And you don't have this concept of like a dream, right? And so it was interesting. My aunt used to say to me, kid, your life can be different than ours. I mean, I was 5 feet at 7 years old. My aunt was 5 feet tall, and she'd be like, you little shit, I don't care how tall you are, like, well, whatever. So in a way, they gave me this incredible stability, walked me to the bus stop, picked me up from the bus stop. Like, it was very routine. I understood about not being able to have things. I was aware of like.
Were you aware of loss too with losing your birth father? Were you aware of that at that time?
Yeah. It was different though, because he wasn't around every day. It was a different kind of loss. He'd come and visit. And it's funny, I look a lot like both of my parents. I'm very tall in the hair like my mother, and my face is very similar to my father. So I have this strong identification with them. But then when he died, I understood he was gone, but it's not like if somebody comes home every day. That's a different kind of loss. And I think when I wasn't living with my mother, by the time I was 2, it's like you're armored up in a different way. Like, you're like, okay. Like,
and you never went back to living with her?
No, I did. That's how I ended up in St. Thomas at 7. And it's, listen, my mom did the best she could, but she just, I had to really kind of navigate stuff on my own. And anyway, so then I moved down to St. Thomas. And the great thing about that was this. There was no way, there was no protocol, there was no expectation on how to be. So what happens is in a way, you think I never thought about college. I never thought about any of that. I was like, I'll get out of high school. If I can barely stand it, I'll probably work in a gift shop. And I'll just kind of see what happens. But I never felt obliged. And then when they moved me to St. Thomas, my junior year of high school, because I was tall, they were like, oh, you're going to play basketball and volleyball. I went headfirst into sports. I had a couple good coaches. I was very coachable. And then I got scholarships to college, like within 18 months of when I moved from the Caribbean, and moved out of my house at 17. And that was that.
Yeah. Same with me. When I went off to college, I never, that was it. I was gone. But I think that that's kind of over with. You know what I mean? My sister and her, you know, my sister's a basketball coach, a head basketball coach, and my brother-in-law, who's a firefighter in New York City, they just got their house and are leaving my parents' basement at like 30. You know what I mean? Like it's not even, they're not a rarity. That's kind of the way it is. And I think for a lot of us, you know, 17 for me, it was off to school, 18. And then that was it. There was no going back. You kind of learned, you figured out how to pay rent and pay bills, and you figured that out. And again, I think that the whole system has changed. So when you fast forward that upbringing of, there is stability, but there's also kind of all these other things. Now taking that, and I know because I just talked about this today, I won't say why, but taking that into parenting now, right? You're not using a mirror of someone else's parenting, right? You're kind of creating your own. You know, it starts with you. I say this to a lot of my friends, like it starts with us. You know, we were never given, we'd have no trust funds. There's no money. You know, it starts with us. And the raising of the children starts with us. Again, we're not leaning on anything that we were raised by. Isn't that an interesting thing isn't that a kind of interesting pressure in a way?
You know, it's an interesting thing. And I feel like we talked a little bit about this, but it's really an important a point for me, which was like my Aunt Wright she was very loving, but she was also tough on me, right? So I did receive that double message. I did receive like discipline and a lot of love. Mm-hmm. But what happened is I didn't really get a lot of that, like when I moved with my mom. Plus I didn't really actually let anyone parent me. I was pretty much like, you can all kind of fuck off, like pretty much. Like you sort of lost that right. But what I am fumbling through all the time in my parenting, and my kids subconsciously smell it, the weakness, the insecurity of, if you grew up in a home where your parents knew how to administer discipline and love, you knew what it felt like. So you also had the confidence when you have your own children to go, buddy or sweetie, I love you, and absolutely not. And you know that your message of love is not getting lost or impeded by the discipline. And for me, I'm always like, it's funny because I'm such a hard ass in so many ways. And when it comes to my girls, it's like, because I'm insecure about this, and because my mom split and I'm overcompensating and all this stuff, you're like, but do they know I love them? And then because they're Jedi masters and they're here to do everything to make you grow up. Yes. They will make all the moves and know exactly where to get you. And that's the only thing is, so it starts with myself and my husband, and he's a lot more fluid and secure because I think he had a really good mom. And so for me, I'm always second guessing, because this is the thing. My poor mother, and it's her doing, and even if I'd moved back in with her and let's say she really showed up, she would have had a shot. And then she would have had another shot when I was an adult, because I said to her many times, let's not make up for what happened. Let's start new and try to develop like a relationship. Right. And she could never do that. And so we've never really developed a relationship. And so what I see in her is how much suffering that must cause her. I'm her only child, that we're not really in each other's lives. Like I'm a responsible daughter, but I'm not really emotionally, and she doesn't really know anything about my life and whatever. I don't want to look down the barrel of that gun.
Yeah, it's so much easier said than done than when we're in it, right? I remember, and we touched on this briefly in one of our 73 podcasts we did, was when I felt the moment to go, reach out to my birth father. I was like, oh man, I want to go reach out to this dude, and I want to, put everything behind us and this and that. And then I found out on the internet he had passed away by doing this public records thing. I remember thinking, wow, this was a lesson. Like, and I can tell anybody else, like, hey man, while people are here, you got to do what you got to do and all that. But the truth is, it's so much easier said than done, because my sisters are very in my mom's life. Like they work with her, they're with her, they all live within a mile of each other. Like they're all over each other. And I was always the one who was gone. I was just gone. And I try to include in the life, but I think I've just been conditioned from kind of a young age to kind of do my own thing. And, it's that Cats in the Cradle song that probably gets me to cry, where I'm like, oh man, I don't want my kids to do this to me. But at the same time, it's like you have to watch where your energy's going towards that. Because right now I definitely serve as the disciplinarian to my two little boys. And at the same time, it's 50-50. It's like a lot of love and and that is a very special. And again, I know girls and boys are so different growing up, because I see it. All my friends have daughters, all of them. And it's just so different with these two. I've just always wondered about that old term, like sins of the father and stuff like that. Do you pass on? Is there stuff innately in you? And I think what we were saying before about you is yes, there was the stability with your aunt and uncle, and yes, you went back, and yes, there was, you were with your mom and all that, but it's more than that. It's not the physical presence of someone. It's the emotional presence of someone in the life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of us at our age, we didn't have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it was like they rebounded. Their parents, World War II, and then, they came out of that time, and it was like, hey, listen, there's food on the table and we're safe. And then the 60s came, and my parents, they were all freewheeling and got all like loosey goosey. And it was like, maybe by the time they could pay attention, we were gone already. And so we've overcompensated. I think, I always tell my daughters, all of them, if you want to, when you are an adult and you want to call me and talk, or if you choose to come home to visit because that feels good for you in your life, that's what I want for you. You're not obliged. Because I always say, in every relationship except one, every relationship, it is so healthy to say, what do I get from this? And that could be inspiration, this person, the way they live. I don't mean what do I get? Because also, as long as you're willing to give, like if up front, if you top load and you go, hey, I'm willing to give, you have to check in even with your partner and be like, what am I getting from this? Yeah. We just don't, there's only one relationship we don't ask that. And that's with our children. And the other thing I always say is, even if I'm 80, I should act like the parent. Because I understand it, but when parents flip it and be like, oh, you don't call me or whatever. I've even had things, I tell a story once when one time my oldest daughter, she was being kind of bitchy. She was like 19 or 20, and she's going to be 25 soon. And I was like, I haven't talked to Bella in a couple weeks. She was in college, and I'm like, I really don't want to talk to her. And then I was like, this voice came in, you're the parent, and it was like, oh, you pick up the phone, you go, hi, honey, I love you. How are you? And that's the thing. You're the parent. And so that is, for me, that's what I know is important, is that you're not allowed to manipulate. You can't make them feel guilty. It's none of that. And I know people are listening going, well, wait a second, that's like half my parenting. And when I'm tempted, I see it. I go, oh, I want to make this kid feel guilty to get what I want, or get them to move the way I want them to move. And I'm like, no, you got to play by the rules. You're going to be the parent. And I'll tell you, my middle daughter, gone through some stuff with her over the course of like 3 and 4 years, by the way. And she said to me one time about a year ago, I want to tell you something. I really appreciate that you've always acted like the adult. And I was like, okay, that's a good thing. Because when you want to go low, or you want to have your feelings and you want to react, you have to go, no, I've got to be the parent. This isn't about me. And it's a heavy. Isn't it like that in every relationship? I mean, definitely more so with kids. But you said something that is so. People feel weird saying this. Like, even when you said it, I was like, "This is when you say, what am I getting from this?" Right? That's healthy. It's so healthy to say, and people get so weird about it because they're like, "What do you mean? What are you getting? And it's like, no. Like I've said this to my wife, and I say it to many people in my life. I say, no. They're like, because everybody's always afraid I'm going to leave. I'm the one who leaves. I'm the one who walks away. It's just the way it is. Like, because I said the best and worst quality I have as a person is I could be, something's over in a second, and I just stop. I just stop thinking about it. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I think it's healthy. Right. I don't remember what happened last week. It's a survival mechanism. I'm just like, okay, good. Let's go. Let's move on. And then maybe if like
a commercial comes on that's maybe a little too emotional, I start to get wrecked. Or if I watch some kind of movie that hits me the wrong way, I'm like, why am I a disaster over this? There was nothing in there that should be. And maybe it is some pent up something. But the point is that I tell people all the time, I'm here because I want to be here, right? I'm your friend because I want to be your friend. If I'm not, it means I don't want to be. I'm not doing this for any other reason. So be secure in that. Now, I think that when we say, what am I getting from this? If most people turned around and assessed all the people in their lives, they put barriers on it. They go, yeah, but it's my mom, or but it's my sister. Like, I have to talk to them. And you go, no, you don't. Who told you that? If it's making your life bad, why, or it's not giving you anything, why would you do that? So I think that that's so incredible, because your daughters obviously are at that age now where it's the waters are going to start to get testy, especially for you. Not so much for Laird, but for you.
Oh no, Laird, it's funny because Laird will say to me, well, like at least you get some like the good, like the love stuff, because I have enough masculinity in my personality that was like, well, let's say a daughter's bitchy to you. I don't go, why'd you talk to me like that? I typically go like, yeah, no. And then I just get away. I don't go down that hole and swim in that water, because you're going to die. You'll die. You'll drown. They'll kill you. You're
not going to beat them. Yeah.
And they'll just they're not. And so but I think the idea of saying, and I tell my kids this, I have to earn it too. I don't just get the title because I'm your parent. I'm going to earn it every day too. And so when we talk about like, oh, well, that's our parent. Well, is our parent earning it too? Now, let's say you had a parent and they raised you and they did a great, they worked, you saw that they really gave their best and they tried and they were there. And then all of a sudden they're 75 and they're losing their mind and seriously they have dementia. Yeah, freaking take care of them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, and this is where not being obliged has helped me be free, which is I want to do the right thing. And I work really hard to say to myself, what is the best way to conduct myself in this situation right now? But I'm still liberated from going, this relationship is unhealthy for me. I've got to go. And not with anger, not with disdain, not blaming the other person. I have a friend, very funny, random friend, Vincent Gallo. And Vincent Gallo will know all about him. Brown bunny. Will say, yeah, I mean, he's weirdly like the best is when you like we've had Gallo in Hawaii and he'll be in the truck and some random person we know is like, is that Vincent Gallo with Laird? And I'm like, yeah, it's a whole story.
His name has been mentioned a lot because he can make movies with like 6 people, and that's kind of the way Hollywood needs to restart. So his name has been mentioned many times recently.
Listen, that's to me is a prince, but you have to be speaking a very specific language.
Right.
But what I learned from Gallo is, if something makes him or someone or a dynamic makes him truly uncomfortable, he's like a cloud of smoke, man. He just disappears. Puff. And there's no like, and I believe in like having a real clear communication, but I think people should have the right. But you have to give it a chance. Like you have to say, hey, listen, like, let's communicate and this and that. And if it just keeps going back and forth and it's years of it, it's like, yo, like life is short. Like and you have children and you have a partner and you have work. When something is, and it doesn't have to be done. Another person who helped me with this weirdly is someone introduced me to Byron Katie. She has a program called The Work. Mm-hmm. And it's so just straight up. It's just so straightforward. Like, why do we have all these narratives? And like, like she has 4 questions. Is it true? And you're like, yeah, they're not nice to me, like, or whatever thing, or I have to be friends with them. Oh, is that true? Yeah, I've known them for 25 years. They saved my dog once. And she's like, well, can you know that to be true for sure? Like you have to stay friends with them. And then she's like, who are you when you think those thoughts, and who would you be without that belief? Right. And sometimes you just kind of go, life is a minute. What do I want to do at the time? And not to be mad at people, not to blame people. You've got to take the responsibility, but to be okay to go, you know what? I love you so much. This isn't good for me.
Yeah. I don't really remember many things my birth father said to me. I remember like, cause he was around, like, we still talked up until.
Would you say like 9 years? Or something?
Well, no, he was out when I was 9 out of the family, but we still saw each other. Like he would still be around and, even when I was in LA, when I was in my 20s, I had talked to him. We just had gone. We would go years without speaking. But I'll never forget. I remember one thing he said to me, and I thought something had happened, and I'll never forget because we were in the car together. We were in New York, and something had happened. And I was young. I was in my teens, probably in early high school. And I would spend some time with him here and there. And he said something. He said, and again, I don't know what happened. There wasn't cell phones, but he had a meeting or something that happened. And he come out and he said, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you one thing. And he goes, and just remember this. If someone doesn't benefit your life, keep him at arm's length. And he said, he goes, and I'm not saying be mean to them. And he was like aggressive when he was saying, he goes, I'm not saying, he goes, just don't let them in your space. And I was like, and I remember it as clear as day. And I was like, ooh, something happened at the moment. Cause I was young. I was like, oh, but then it resonated with me. And now I think the excuses we make for ourselves are, well, I'm in business with this person, or, well, it's my wife's friend's husband, or, it's this, or, we use excuses, or again, the big one, their family, they're my cousin, they're my sister, they're my this. There's always something that we use to justify, it's not even bad behavior, to justify an energy that doesn't mix with ours. I don't want to get all esoteric and weird, but something where it's like, I'm not vibing with this person. I'm cool.
Yeah, or they come over and get hammered at your house, and then they're talking smack about who knows what for the 97th time. Yep. And you're just like, wow.
Yeah. And it's just like almost like a slight venom is coming off them. And I've been around that so much, and I'm just like, well, how do I get out of this situation? Because I have to be here, like I'm working with the person, or I'm, and what I've seen recently from me over the last few years, and you've probably seen this more than I have, or maybe not, is since the social media of it all, the spotlight of it all, what I've seen is like a desperation for the spotlight, like so desperate for, like they need the attention. And that's the first ring of my alarm when I see people who are like, they're looking over your shoulder if they're talking to you for someone else, or they're talking to you but they're seeing what they can get from you, or it's just this, they're looking for something. And I always read that. That's like, right, my radar's at its highest. And that's the one that kind of gets me to go, okay, I'm going to walk away from this. This is not what I don't like this.
Hollywood is a lot of angling, right? And I have to be honest, I'm a lot like this, but Laird is, when I say it's impossible for Laird to be an operator or to be around operators, it's uncomfortable. Like when I see it, I start sweating my armpits and I go, oh, here we go. So you have scenarios. Let's say you're at a project 3 months with a person and you go, hey, this isn't my type of guy, but you know what? 3 months, I'm going to put a frame around it. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. I understand what it is. And also maybe maybe you're on set with this person. I'm going to watch them. Is there anything I can learn? Okay, great. That's what I got from that. The ones I'm talking about are those like long-term relationships where you're really investing, because I think the other thing is, like, I've come into my marriage with this idea, and I have this with all my friends. How can I make your life better? I will come with that attitude, because for me, that's what I'm in charge of. I'm not in charge of what are you going to do for me? I'm not in charge of like, Laird, let me give you the list. This is what you're going to do. No, you're in charge of that. We can communicate, but ultimately I'm in charge of how can I make your life better? And I think what happens is then you get this thing of like, oh, it's, that expression, what president said it, no complaining, no explaining. Mm-hmm. I think those go part and parcel. If you're willing to say, well, how can I make your life better? You're all willing. It's okay to defend your real estate and space and go, I love you. And it's just not going to work.
Yeah. And also you can kind of, they say if you're keeping your side of the street clean, it's like you can kind of know I did everything I could. Like I'm just being me. And I always say, like, I'm not for everyone. That's cool. Everyone's not for me. That's cool. I think that all of us at one point of our life or another want things to work out. We're hopefully we want relationships to work out. We want people to be cool, but sometimes it just doesn't work. What I've tried to find in my life whether it be my, my father-in-law or, or whatever, or other people, friends, coworkers, is I try to find something that they apparently like. And then because I can talk about anything, I'll kind of go in with that. So if they have a dog, I'll be like, let me talk about the dog for a little while. And I'll go into dogs and like how cool they are. And there's our communication. We now, because we're going to see each other, whether it be, in family functions or work, let's go with the dog stuff. And then maybe we can build from that and maybe not, but we have that one thing and that's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm always going to try, like you said, but I'm also going to be myself. I'm going to come in and be me. And, and again, that's not, especially in my business, that's not, typical. Everybody's coming in different. And they're coming in with an agenda. And I think that what you guys and what I'm so admire about your life and, what I've seen is that sport activity, being active and being competitive and being whatever, it kind of sheds a lot out, right? It kind of gets a lot of the bullshit out of the way, the minutia, because one, you're exhausted, you're all going in on the same goal and you're trying to work out. Don't you feel like, and obviously because you guys are like that so much in your lives and you've come from that, don't you feel like the people who you're surrounding yourselves with kind of have that same attitude?
A lot of them do. Unless you get, either, occasionally you get a spoiled athlete. They last like 4 minutes, and another really good secret I've learned through time is you can meet people, right? And you can really let's say you're around them and all of a sudden you're like, well, why would they say that? And then I get an internal voice going, oh, it's like any two people. And I have girlfriends and guy friends that I have this with. Chemistry. I think sometimes the minute I start thinking I'm thinking critically of a person when I've been around them too long, I go, back it up. Stop with the internal criticism. Yeah. You just don't have chemistry. Just back up. Right. It's okay. And just leave it to that, because that's the whole thing. Like the girls that I meet or guys that I meet, and it's like my husband, it's like, oh, I just have chemistry. Yeah. And I don't think we have to always force it. And it's okay if even you seem similar, but you just don't really have that chemistry. Instead of going, well, I don't understand. Don't worry about understanding it. You're so right. Let it, it's like, I always say a lot of times I like to act like I'm a strain or a filter. And when things are coming that I'm like, yo, this is not going to be something I like or that's going to irritate me, I don't run towards it. I either move away or I filter it. It just goes right through and I don't catch it. I don't pay attention as closely. Yeah. I don't listen as astutely. I just let it ride, because if you can't predict at a certain time in your life by a certain age, scenarios that are going to probably agitate or irritate you or not bring out the best in you, which is your responsibility to be the best you, figure it out, navigate it, figure it out,
But don't, and now, you've been with the podcast, right? With your podcast and all that, you get some people on and it might not work. You know what I mean? I've had in the short time that I've been doing it, I get some people on and I'm like, okay, they're not okay. Let's see how this goes. They're can dancers. They're, you try to take them down a road and they're just like, nope, not doing that. And you're like, oh, okay, so this isn't going to be interesting. Let's try to figure this out. And it's so weird because you go, we're both coming on to talk. So podcasting is really interesting because it's a long form conversation between two humans. It really does get it down to the basement level. Like, hey, we're here. Let's talk about it. Let's get into some stuff. Let's jump around the globe a little in our brains. And some people just can't do it. They don't want to do it. No, what do you do in that situation?
It's funny. I will do a lot of extra listening when I'm in that. I'm like, oh, I'm not speaking their language. Okay, I need to pay a little more attention. And then what I'll try to do is maybe come in from a different angle and say, okay, so I understand all that. Was there ever a time that maybe you were uncomfortable or afraid, even while it was all kind of just try to almost reroute it in such a way that it's still safe. I think it's your job, and I used to do a podcast with a friend of mine, Neil, who's a writer, and he's different. Like, I want people to feel safe. Mm-hmm. And also I'm female. So I don't
totally
don't want to get. Neil is a writer, reporter. So in a way, sometimes he's like, I know that's your answer, but I don't believe you. Like, what's really behind that? And I used to be like, oh my goodness, So my whole thing is, then I'll also know, I'll see that, we're going to have limitations on how far we're going to go, but let's see if I can push them just a little further, and make them feel safe the whole time. If it's in person, it's easier because you can kind of, I don't want to say put them on the spot a little bit, mm-hmm. but you kind of can. And, but my whole thing in that scenario is I'm going to make you feel as safe as possible. But also at some point we're going to keep kind of revisiting things until maybe you give me, something else.
Yeah, but you've also been, I think the benefit that you have two incredible benefits is you've been on the other side of it. You've had people ask you questions where you're like, wait a second, hold up, homie. You can't ask me, right? That.
Sure.
Also, being one of the first truly out there female athletes, like with Nike and with everything, mm-hmm. and being larger than life in everywhere, you've had at a time that wasn't the time now, right? So people are going in and asking these questions so you're kind of super aware of the art of how people ask questions, right? And what kind of is not, what might not go anywhere, or not even bad or good, just what doesn't mesh. Well, that helped a lot, right?
Well, also just being around it, and also walking away from interviews and being like, what was so great about that? And why was I able to communicate? Why did they make me look better or smarter than I actually am? And really learning about what they did. I've also had this as a female. I've interviewed tons of male athletes. Okay. Now, if it's in person, because I'm 6'3", there's an opportunity to use size as an advantage. And femininity, both, right? You lean on them a little, but then you're still like a girl. It's like a whole weird thing, right? But I've also had male athletes, and Laird actually was one of them. And there was a famous bike rider named Jamie Best, an Englishman who was an astounding vert BMX rider in the days of like Dave Mira. And I went to interview. Yeah, exactly. And they used to, and I would be there, and I would never do things after races because I said, hey, I'm never going to ask somebody how disappointed that you felt, because I know what that feels like. I want to talk to you about how do you prepare and how's your body feeling and, whatever. I want to tell your story. I'm not here to be like, wow, bummer, that's not me. So I went to interview Jamie, and he was pretty rude. And Laird was a little harsh in the beginning too. And neither one of them knew I was an athlete. And later I had a conversation with Jamie. He's like, I'm so sorry. I thought you were a girl they hired who knew nothing about what this experience would be like. And I didn't want to talk to you. So, a really good rule of thumb that I've come into all of this, and I talk about this to a lot of young athletes and people who are trying to forge their way, even in an entrepreneurship, even more importantly, if you want to create a product or something. And I've dealt with it with my career and Laird's career. Every time I deal with it, I think nobody cares. Meaning, sometimes we get so connected and so emotional, and we have enough people around us to tell us how great and important it all is. Mm-hmm. And that's one of 1 billion little mini universes. Actors have it, it's so great, it's so great. No, that's not what you should do. What you should do is go, nobody gives a shit about your work. This product that you made is not that important. It doesn't matter, because we all get so attached to everything.
So attached.
Instead of being like, okay, I'm going to enter this situation like nobody cares. And I'm just going to show up and do the best I can. And when you go through that, even as an entrepreneur, because then you can say objective, you got to keep backing up going, well, how's the timing? Is there a market value? Is there a place? Is there a market for there? Is there consumers for this? Who cares? I care. Me and all my friends care. It's like, okay, that's 8 of you. That's awesome. So having that. And so it also helps, I think, when you're talking to people.
Yeah. And what you just said is very hard for perfectionists, right? For high achievers, right? Because everything you're doing is the most important thing in the world, right? At the moment. And then that leads to a lot of bad things. You take things personal. The littlest improv on something, or the littlest like one thread that gets pulled, you can go to pieces because you're like, no. I had a plan here. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And that is something that, you know, I've had to recognize in my own brain. And I always use the example of like, let's say I go do a certain movie. And at the moment, I'm like, I'm so in it. I don't talk to anyone. I can go a month without speaking to someone else. I'll lock myself in my room. I'll eat. I'll go to set. And I'm like so in it. And then it's out of my hands. It's up to the studio, the marketing department. When is it released? What else came out against it? How did the other people do in the film? What was the score? What was this? And I sit there and I get almost like personally offended if it didn't do well. And I'm like, what? That has nothing to do with me. And now I've also taken that into, like you said, no one gives a shit. We assume, especially in a perfectionist attitude of like, this has to be done this way. No, you have to do it that way. And they're like, it's fine. If it's an hour later, it's fine. And again, that's the thing that I think that we confuse with drive to do everything. We confuse with trying to be perfect, is I guess the way I'm saying it. It's not a possibility. So when you're around and you're around a lot more athletes, if I'm speaking to you, we can speak about 10 things that we have in common, from family to, you know, maybe having moments in the spotlight to marriage, to, you know, to training, to this. So we could find common ground. Now, if I speak with another actor about acting, I can speak with them about it and go, right. Okay. When you were doing this and you were doing that. But if I speak to someone who's never acted before, it's almost impossible for them to imagine in their head. Just like if someone's speaking to you about certain things with high level athletics, they go, no, that's impossible to understand that and to be an athlete at a high level and someone to understand it who's not. You know what I mean? Because
right. But let me say this. I've never been an actor, but then and this is where the interviewing also, I think, comes into play. It's the human experience. So you're doing something, you had an epiphany when you did the movie that when you were in acting school that you didn't plan on doing. And then you were with an older actor and then they're discussing all the things that they're talking in acting school. Right. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, that's what I'm going to do. And you move to California, you go, I'm going to figure it out. I even asked you, what gave you the courage? I had nothing to lose. Yeah. Okay. There are things within that experience. I didn't have that experience. And many people listening didn't have that experience, but they've had human experiences like that. And so I think it's about taking whatever template or platform people working, going, what's the human? Oh, he took a risk. He failed many times. Right. There was good fortune. There was learning moments. There was levels of success. There was now trying to sustain and even grow success. Right. So there's within everyone's story, I think is the human parts. Now, if you have a person who, like when I talked about my Aunt Norette, some of that might be Chinese to my Aunt Norette. You know what I mean? And
or you can find a commonality with something she's done to bring it into something else. 100%.
Yes. But I think that's where all the fascinating learning comes from is I go, your world would scare the hell out of me. And the idea of being able to feel something that I wasn't really just me as my person feeling and really committing to that. Where do you get that from? You know what I mean? Like, and everyone's different.
You felt it before.
Yes, I have. But and you saying, hey, I need to really understand the script so then I can be fluid and I can be spontaneous. And other people are probably pretending, I would imagine. Right. Most. Right. So it's like we have all those variations of it. So I think it's what's fascinating for me when I talk to people is why are they doing what they're doing? What's turning them on? What's their thinking about why they're doing it? And some of it, a lot of times you look at it, it's in certain things and you go, none of that makes sense. But I talked to a quantum physicist once And I asked him, I said, Spiros, let me ask you a question. You know so much in the world. Does that keep you from like believing in God and a bigger thing? And he said, no, my religion is empathy, because I believe when you can talk to a person, any person, you can always find common ground. And I think when you talk to people, then all of a sudden, even if you don't agree, you go, I understand how the guy thinks like that.
Yeah. And it's why I don't. And again, we spoke about this in chapter 17 of our meetings was, I think that what I was saying is that's why I'm not, and I don't know how to say this without people thinking that I don't have like a certain belief, is I'm not hell bent on anything. Like, you know, if I think something like, you know, I'm a vegan, right? It doesn't mean that I think other people should be. It's just what works for me. I've done it all. I've tried it all. It just works for me. It has for a long time. Now I don't judge anyone who isn't. I think it's amazing. I can imagine, right? But I don't die on that hill. I'm very fluid in my thinking of anything, right? Now, that doesn't hold up for things that are horrifically bad and stuff like that, right? But in a good-natured intention, I have an open mind about everything. Now, and I remember this because we used the athlete term before. One of my brother's best friends, amazing human being in my life, was a 10,000-yard rusher, played in the Super Bowl, starting running back, you know, made more money, he'll go to the Hall of Fame. He's now an actor, and we were on a TV show together, and we played not just partners on the show, but like we used to be love interests. And this was something where he had never, like him to do this and take this turn as an actor was not just frightening to him. It was the polar opposite of what he was geared to do as an athlete, as a running back moving forward, and the blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. Just, you know, train. And I said, you played in the Super Bowl. You've literally led the league in rushing. You've had more pressure, and you're worried about doing this scene. Don't worry about it. But it was a whole different form of pressure for him. So what I did is I spoke to him about getting the two commonalities as close as you can so your brain can work. And that's kind of what I think what you were saying is we can find that with anyone. Like if someone has a hardcore belief about something, I go, why? Just tell me, why do you believe that? And they go, well, this, and this. And I go, okay, that makes sense. Well, let's drill down on that. Let's talk about that. Let me tell you why I believe this or why I think this. And what that does is it's also kind of fearful for people because they're like, oh, he'll listen. He'll conversate about something and about anything, and I'll learn something from it. And I think that is the point, because you said earlier, our life is 1 second. 1 second. And we know, and I know every single day, like I'm celebrating one of my dogs. It's his 12th birthday. We think so. He was rescued many years back, but we think he's 12. We lost 2 this year. So he's the lone. Yeah, he's the lone guy left. And I was just walking with him right before this, me and you sitting down, and I was walking with him, and I looked at him and I went, wow, like 5 minutes ago, I found you in Compton, like in 5 minutes ago. And it's like 11 years ago, but it feels like I remember it. I could smell it. I see it. So it's over in a second. How do you, because your life is big, right? You guys live a pretty big life, meaning that when I say big, it's active. It's an active life.
It is.
So days are going pretty fast, right? Mm-hmm. The kids are growing up. Everything's going fast. How do you kind of slow it down for yourself personally, or say turn it off a little or turn it down? Yeah. And does that cause any anxiety, or have you learned like by turning it down?
Believe this or not. So I'm 50 and I've been with Laird since I was 25. Okay. And so that's almost half of my life.
Amazing.
And one thing that both Laird and I separately did before we knew each other, and I did this living in New York City at 18 years old, was no. Hey, do you want to go to the club? Do you want to go to MK's? No, I don't. And Laird is like, pissed if we have to go to a dinner, and he's doing the math, and he's like, well, we're not going to get home until 9:30, right? Like Laird, if he could be in bed at 8:30, right? So one thing this is what I say about both of us independently. And I'm not sure why. Him, I understand more because ultimately when you're free, you go to bed early so you can get up early so you can beat the wind. And that surfers get up early typically. And this is a person who is not much for being overly self-destructive. He did drink alcohol for many years, but he'd still be in bed by 9:30 up at whatever fact. And I don't mean like, oh, I had a beer. I mean, Laird does everything very intensely.
Yeah, that's hence why I stopped.
That was an exciting first 10 years of our marriage. I was like, oh, God, that's another podcast. But anyway, and I, for some reason, and I think because I grew up with like radical adults, our internal compass for self-preservation is pretty high. And so both of us separately are like, yeah, I don't know that it's out there. It's not out there. So one of the ways I've always kept it slower was I see my very close friends. I break bread with them now. And since my children have been born, I'm pretty diligent about breaking bread with them and being with them and going to bed early and living. In some ways, parts of our life are incredibly monotonous because also, and you know this, when you want to build anything, it takes repetition.
Routine too, yeah.
Yeah. So our training, our eating, our whole thing, there's a lot of repetition. And that's how you sort of get that progress. So, we're not busying ourselves with a lot of yeses. And like Laird's favorite line is, if anyone's going to waste my time, it's going to be me. And I'm the one in the family that goes to all the meetings. Like if it's worth it, I have to go to 3 meetings and then I will bring it to Laird. So I have a better capacity for that than he does. A little bit more of the bullshit, like I know sometimes like you have 100 doors of bullshit and then you do find like the one, and you know this in your business, you have to go to 1 million meetings, but it's just also kind of getting to that quicker going, I'm not going to that meeting. I'm not going to meet that person. I'm not going to like just doing things. What do they say? Have to, should do, want to, and sort of keeping those closer together and being willing to be like, hey, when I show up to work, I will work. No one's going to work harder, but I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to also have to try to operate to get what I want. I just think it's always been really pretty clear, at least to me, what feels good and important. And it's actually kind of boring.
Yeah. And that's what I say about my life. Two things that came to my mind that I always say is discipline is the root of all goodness, right? I'm a big believer in that. And what I mean by that for me is I'm a no guy. I'm no, that's not happening. And I'm pretty obvious about it too. Like I don't even hold back. I'm like, no, I'd rather do anything else than that. I'm not doing that. And I say that to people and they're like, oh, you're not even going to fake it. I'm like, no, I would never do that. And people ask me that all the time. Like even here, it'd be like, hey, we're going on the party boat on the lake. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Oh God.
No, I would never do that. And they're like, and people say, but it's fun. I go, not for me. Don't drink. Yeah. Nothing for me there. It's not, I'm good. I'm cool. And again, like people who go golfing all the time. I have no problems with golfing. I just don't do it. It's not for me. Okay. It doesn't mean I'm not going to waste 6 hours of my life on a golf.
Laird's like, I've never done anything that, he goes, I've never done anything that I was so tired after and so frustrated that took so long, but I actually didn't do any work.
No. Again, nope, it's just not for me. Now people might look at me and go, you're going to go run 10 miles. Why? And I go, because I like to, right? It's what I want to do. So again, I think a big part of that. And what I hear from you is like, you have to be okay with yourself and know that I tell people my life is so boring. It's so boring. Like you don't want my life. It's boring. And they're like, no, but you do this. And I go, no, don't let social media tell you a lie. That's a picture. I said, my life is very boring. And like I said, I eat the same thing every day. I get up at the same exact time. I go to bed the same exact time. It's very boring, but I'm okay with it. And that's all that matters. Just like you guys are okay with it and you're okay with it. I guess my one thing that I wanted to ask you, and I know I don't want to keep you because we have 96 hours of podcasting in the bank.
You're never keeping me.
Okay, good. Because I'm going to keep you a little longer.
Yeah.
Do you guys work together as a couple? Like, do you work together?
Oh yeah, we have. So, okay.
I'm interested in this for a lot of reasons.
So when I met Laird, and wait, I want to say one thing to finish out the other part, which is, you know, when you hear your boys running from pitter patter room to room, you know that sound?
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes I used to joke, like when one of my girls was coming my way, I'd be like, oh my God, she's coming, you know, like, because they're so intense. But for me, the richness in life is like, it's so simple. It is not ever, has never been. I'm not a grand girl, you know, like, and Laird is like, he's all about nature. And so the richness has always been in hearing them laugh in the next room, or in eating a beautiful meal with people that I really love, and hearing and exchanging and being playful and fun with them, and being able to remember to recognize, notice quickly, not make a big deal like, oh my gosh, but just to grab it and take it in, that richness. Because when we say our lives are boring, of course there's a routine in them, but there's magic everywhere. And it isn't about going like, look at the light shining off the rock, but it is about noticing and taking it in, and hearing our kids giggle, and just the silly, and something, or a look that your wife gives you, and you look into her eye. Your wife has two different color eyes, right?
Yeah. It's the dichromium. I always say it wrong. She has a half green eye, so half brown, two green, half gray. And
seeing that and being like, So it's just, for me, that's it. It's that sometimes it's like I'm in a taxi in New York in those days, and you look and you notice something really beautiful. Yep. You know, like two people having this incredible exchange or laughter or something. That's it for me. I don't know what else it is. Then in personally saying, hey, am I putting down an honest days of living? Like that pursuit, whatever that looks like to each person. And after that, it's like, okay. But as far as Laird and I working together, when I met Laird, you know, the only sport kind of harder to sell than beach volleyball is probably big wave surfing. And so I had a manager at the time, and we'd been doing a lot of tap dancing, because like you said, the timing was, I was sort of part of a group of women that were forging a path, and there were women ahead of us that had lined out the path, and now we were trying to cut it in a little bit. And so we got into storytelling for Laird, because we thought, nobody surfs, first of all. Nobody can go out there and actually look at it. You can't be in an arena. And, you know, Laird luckily is articulate and a very good surfer. So it was authentic. So we started there. And what happened is Laird and I developed a trust, which is, I know Laird just really doesn't want to be scheduled. When you have people who are mountains or in ocean and things, they want to feel like when they wake up that day, whatever Mother Nature hands them, that is what they will do. Is it the wind? Is it the ocean? Whatever. Now, obviously, that's not possible all the time. You have to go to meetings. You have to show up to shoots. Those take scheduling. Okay. So I would say this is something you should do. So we started there. Then about 8-9 years ago, no agents, no managers, just us, and tap dancing and entrepreneurship. So basically my role in Laird's life, I would say, is sort of his confidant / kind of wrangler. And he knows if I say, hey, you have an interview at 3, I vetted it. I know who it is. I know it's not a waste of his time. We have a business. We have Laird Superfood together. He has certain parts. I have other parts that we do. Luckily, there's an executive team of grownups that are really doing it. But yes, we work together. And I'll tell you the funniest scenario of us working together. Laird does not like to be like, he doesn't do social media. I do a social media, but I'll be like, hey, you need to do a shout out, or it's this guy's 50th birthday and we're going to do it. Or you're going to call somebody on the phone. I'll be like, you're calling this kid. He's 14. He's having a rough go. Here's his, takes 30 seconds, right? I am, you are, let's do it. And when I have to ask him to do things on camera, I will turn my back so I can hear him, but so he doesn't have to see his wife's face on the other side. I turn my back to him and I just listen and put my head down, and I'll be like, okay, that was good. Can you remember this word? And just a little lighter. And then I shut up.
My, if I have to put myself on tape for things, Megan is my scene partner, and she runs everything. We are also in multiple things together. And the reason I ask that is because it is very interesting. And when I say interesting, that is always a much bigger word than the length of how it's spelt. Meaning that if you do business a certain way and you are a certain way with certain people and the way you want it, especially if, a lot of people don't get things done and they do whatever, you have to understand that when you're in business together, that it's not, it has to be an equal thing, right? There can't be one person yelling at the other, but also like you just said, there are certain qualities that she has that I do not have at all. And then there are ones that I have that, she doesn't. And the thing is that I think it's still something, and we're very honest, that we're trying to figure out, especially with young kids, very difficult when they're super young, right? Mainly because, like you said, you guys have been, the last 8-9 years with no managers, no agents, no nothing, so the kids were even older than ours are now, 2 and 4 we're in the mix right now.
Well, not only 2 and 4, you're in the mix. It's like every day starts already at 7. Then pile in your personal relationship, your working relationship, and then just living. But it starts at 7.
Yeah, my kid, we're training the potty training the 2-year-old. He was doing amazing before, the whole thing we're in, and then it just went south now that we've been in the house for so long, and we're trying to get it back. And today, like I was running to a meeting in the office, and I was, coming from one room to the other, and he had peed on the floor, and my other one, he just peed right on the floor, and then the other one was taking stickers and putting them all over the house on everything. And I knew that these specific stickers was going to need Goo Gone to get off. Like, these are going to be a rough one. So I was like, please just stop with the stickers. Right.
Yeah.
And he took everything out of the pantry because he wanted to create a store for the dog's birthday. So he wanted to have a store to go to. And I stopped for a second. I looked around and I went, I can't be a part of this. I have to go take this meeting. I can't engage in this.
Yeah.
So I looked at Megan and I said, I'm sorry, I have to go do this. And it's funny because when you're in stuff together, there is these things that kind of come up, and especially now with the situation we're in and all this. So I think it's really interesting. I don't think a lot of people can imagine being in business with their spouse, with their significant other, because most people go to work or the other one goes to work and they come back and they don't really even talk about what the other person does. And I know there is definitely positives and negatives to both sides of that equation, I would imagine. So, but again, you guys around each other all the time.
Yes. And we also know how to tuck away, whether it's like I go to my office and he's in his shop. We also know how to tuck away. And you even learn how to tuck away emotionally, where you're with each other and both are irritable. Yeah. I'm not going to get up in your shorts. I'm just going to try to contain myself and not provoke you in any way. And again, Laird always talks like, do I want to be happy or do I want to be right? I think the idea of winning is gone in a relationship. There's no I need you to understand how right I am. It's like, I don't. I'm here to love you. And if you can continue to respect me. Another really valuable lesson that helped me with our dynamic was, Laird is what I appreciate about him is he's very honest, but within that, he is also an emotional person. So if he is in a mood, he's stomping around, and that's just he's on it. At least I'm not going to get cancer. I was like, bully for you, Right. But what I did finally figure out how to verbalize is I said, listen, here's the deal. I am very well aware of all the traits that's connected to that I love and I'm a benefactor of, by the way. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what I'm asking is, can it not become you against the world in that moment? Would you allow me a safe spot in there? You don't have to change your mood. You don't have to be in a better mood, but give me a safe place inside the bubble with you. I won't say anything. I'm not here to change you, so that it doesn't feel like it's you against the world, because then that starts to hurt my feelings. And then I get mad.
But that's amazing that you'll do that. A lot of people won't do that.
That he'll do that.
No, a lot of people wouldn't say, hey, let's recognize what's going down here. You're about to rebel against everything and you're about to kind of take this stance. And you're saying, hey, how can I be of benefit here without being the adversary on the other side?
Or just when he gets in the moods now, I don't feel like it's being taken out on me, or that I'm part of the big problem that is the world, that I'm just there, an innocent bystander, and he might walk by me and touch my hand and stomp away. Mm-hmm. But that's good enough, because why I love him is also connected to that. And that's his thing to work out. It's not my thing to force him to work out. And what I've also learned that is very powerful for any of us, if I hold my line, if I say, hey, I have the capacity, the way I'm feeling, to hold a high line, which means like peace and love. If I'm talked to in a snippy way, I respond still in a kind and loving way. If he's struggling, he gets out of it and goes up high so much quicker than if I go down and go, what's your problem? And it's got nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay. I don't need to get involved. And so that was another thing. But again, this is years and years of learning. This isn't like we got married and we got the thing. It was like we almost got divorced when I was 30. It was like we've had things. So it's also learning the language and reminding and remembering every time you see something in your partner that you don't like, follow the line to exactly all the traits, all the characteristics that is also connected to everything you love about them. Mm-hmm. And just that tension, right? We always have that tension in life. And just to remember, because then not only are we sort of acting a little bit like grown-ups, mm-hmm. like, oh, it's unfair. Like, okay, what are you, 13? It's like, I love when people go, it's not fair. It's like, okay, relationships are not fair. I don't know what that means. It's never 50-50 down the middle. You add kids, it's not that. It's like, this is this. But if you see that the person is doing their best, if you know their intentions are good, work from there.
Yeah.
And
that's half the problem. That's half the problem is solved, because you know that you can't make it about this. You can't let your imagination go wild of what is going to happen and what is this and what is that. And I think that is one thing. The other thing that I try to work on a lot with people is I try so hard to live in the moment of my life, meaning like what's in front of me, what's going on, what are we doing, what's happening, and I say it all. I'll just say what is on my brain, right? Like, if someone has a booger in the nose, I'm like, you can't talk to me. You have something in your nose. Like, I have to get that out. Or what's going on? Why do you look like this? Or you're way too drunk. Get away from me. Like, I have these things where I'm very honest, and in that, I don't really harbor resentment at all, because I just don't have it. What I'm trying to do with many people is, there's a lot of people that take stuff and they throw it in that backpack and they just keep it in there and keep it in there, and it keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And I'm like, man, you gotta talk about stuff. Like, you got to get it out, or get it out in the moment. And I think that even means to yourself. And we talked about this, in one of ours, was that thing that we were like, you got to be able to like love yourself. You got to accept yourself, and you got to be cool with yourself. And I think that, the one thing that I appreciate so much about you is that, you are exactly who you say you are, and it doesn't happen automatically. It takes time, right? And it doesn't mean, when people say that, they're like, oh, does that mean like everything's perfect? It's like, no, it's building.
It's an ongoing story. It's a process, and you cross one bridge and it brings you to the next bridge. And sometimes, I'll be honest, there's days where I'm like, I was talking about this today. Like, sometimes in parenting, I'm like, oh, I feel disappointment, or this didn't go the way I planned, and so like it has many personalities of the process, and you just have to keep trying your best, owning your stuff in it, trying to keep listening. Mm-hmm. The other thing is a really important thing that I try to use as a litmus test is, when I get my back up about stuff, it must be very close to home. Like when someone says something like, oh, well, you're this, or one of my kids tells me, and I really want to react. I'm like, you might want to take a look at that, because you're really like, why is that poking you? So these are things that, as you practice them more, and as long as you're around people that it's safe to show, being okay with yourself is being okay with that. Like, you're really fucking imperfect, and like you're scared, and you're having insecurities, and time is moving, and the kids are growing, and I have all these other feelings, and I still have hopes and dreams, and like all these things. And the more that we're allowed to just be all of it all the time, and we have someone who says, okay, it just makes it, you can navigate it. So it's just so much easier.
Yeah. And again, you just touched on something that, if something really ruffles your feathers, like really gets you, why did it get you? Because I know if somebody says something that gets me, I'm like, wait a second. And I kind of deflected in my brain. I'm like, wait, are they right? And then it's like, I'm like, why did they? And then I don't want to go in that door in my brain. I'm just like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And then, but why did it get me like that? Because if someone says something that is completely ridiculous, which I've had said or heard say, I just go, what? You have no idea what you're talking about. Beat it. And it's like, that's ridiculous. But if it gets me, I'm like, that's probably true. And you're right. I think that's something for all of us to kind of look at and go, wait a second. Yeah, that's great. And I love that. And I'm going to let you go back. I know you're going to sleep in like 2 hours. What time do you go to bed at night?
No, I beg to stay till like 9:15. Laird will be like, I can see him looking at the clock at like 7 something. I'm like, it is not even 8 o'clock yet, Or we had a really funny exchange the other night. We had made dinner. We try to really make an attempt to have like very nice dinners, like they mean something. And we're cleaning up, and then he's sitting there and I'm finishing cleaning up and he goes, God, it's almost 9 o'clock. And I just looked over at him and he goes, I'm sorry.
We make the attempt on the couch and then it's usually like, okay, that did not work. Everybody's sleeping. What time is it? How did we get here? I got to go to bed. I'm like, yeah. So there, I am with you, but you're the best. I'm going to miss you now. I'm going to miss you. Don't worry. I'll find a way to bother you. I'm going to say that it broke. The stream broke and sorry. And then I'm just gonna send you invites every so often to a podcast.
Yeah. Hey, if you ever want to riff on anything, let me know.
But we're doing it. We're gonna have some fun. You're the best. Again, tell everybody to say hello. And and you too. So it was a journey, but we did it. But we got it in. She's incredible. Just an incredible person, and just so amazing to get to talk to so many times. I hope you all enjoyed it. So we're rocking and rolling here on Theory, and we're moving and grooving. So if you like what you're hearing and you're kind of into it like I am, go do all that stuff. Go subscribe and review and post about it. #TheoryPod. Tell your friends, tell your dogs. You know how I love dogs. Tell everybody, and scream it from the rooftops. But you can listen to it everywhere: Spotify, Apple, wherever they have these podcast things. But I appreciate you all, and we're having some fun now. So let's keep on trucking, as they say. That's it. That's all. I appreciate you.
This is a time to dream of the times to come, when you're finally free to enjoy. The good times are coming, and your lake or pond will be waiting, clean and crystal clear, ready for summer fun for you and your family. Drop Aquaside pellets in your water, and in weeks, you can participate, swim, and boat in comfort, with joy, and with freedom. Call 800-328-9350 or learn more at aquaside.com. State permit may be required. Visit aquaside.com.
Amazon is hiring near you. Earn a competitive wage and start as soon as 7 days. No resume or experience required. Health and safety are a top priority with all of our roles and sites. Amazon is taking precautions in our buildings to keep people healthy. Go to amazon.com/apply. That's amazon.com/apply. Amazon is an equal opportunity employer.